Edgeworks Nebula.
Hello, hello. Welcome to You Have My Sword. We are ending season 2 with a breakdown on one of the War of the Rings primary characters. Someone who tried their best to finesse the system but played themselves instead. Let's talk about it. Of course, before we get into the episode, we are going to answer a listener question. And Donkey Kong writes in asking, I just finished the Silmarillion. Why do you think more people don't read it? I loved it, by the way. First and foremost, I love that you loved it. And I think this is largely due to two reasons. One, fans start it but don't enjoy it because it's not another Lord of the Rings or Hobbit, or simply they don't know about it. The amount of people that don't realize that Tolkien has written other books that take place in the same world always surprises me. People will find out I'm into Lord of the Rings and tell me they recently read the books, and when we chat and I mention the Silmarillion, they often have no idea that it even exists, let alone that he's written other stories. The Silmarillion is the underlying history, myth, and cosmology of Lord of the Rings, and to a lesser extent, The Hobbit, right? It covers literally thousands of years from the creation of the universe to right up to when Lord of the Rings starts. This is part of the issue for many readers. As other respondents have said, it lacks the connection to a single character or group of character. So this is something that is kind of widely discussed online in like Lord of the Rings forums. A lot of people say that they cannot connect with the Silmarillion because it doesn't follow a core group of characters. It doesn't connect with any one character. There's no main character, right? It is part epic, part history book, part sacred text. It is written in a style to match all of those, which also makes it less appealing to many readers, which I can understand. Readers who aren't used to that style will have to work at understanding it in a way that they don't necessarily need to for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So a character who features at the center of the action in the Silmarillion, Feanor, for example, might earn a few dozen mentions in the text. There is no single character or unifying plotline to follow throughout the book. It kind of jumps around. It almost feels like a collection of short stories, which is why I love it personally. Reading the Silmarillion will give you a deeper understanding of Tolkien's other novels, and he alludes to it frequently in Lord of the Rings. So it's really fun, in my opinion, of course, to read Lord of the Rings and then go and read the Silmarillion, and you can kind of catch these mentions, right? It's really fun. I personally find the characters more complex than in his other books. You will probably find yourself sympathizing with characters like Feanor and Turin, who do awful things and aren't the typical good guys that Frodo and Aragorn are. It is less tropey than The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, a little grittier, a little more real, I guess, as far as fantasy goes. There are a lot of untold stories and unanswered questions between the lines, which I think makes it more appealing to an imaginative person than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, where those books are a bit more straightforward and easy reading, although when I say easy reading, I understand that the prose for Lord of the Rings is not necessarily easy reading to most people. But compared to the Silmarillion, I think it's kind of safe to say that. A lot of people have said, I think it requires multiple readings and making good use of the references in the book. like the family trees, to keep all the characters straight. With that said, though, I don't think it's as difficult as many say it is. I think people give up quickly because it starts off a little jarring and is a huge contrast to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which is usually the books readers have just finished going into the Silmarillion. So people usually read what I meant to say. I said that in such a weird way. People usually finish The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and go, I want more of this content. So they jump into the Silmarillion and go, oh no, this is too much of that content. This is confusing. So people are coming off Lord of the Rings, and having just digested that beautiful epic, going into the Silmarillion can kind of give them whiplash. You have to really be in the mood for high fantasy with almost Shakespearean-like prose. It's not easy reading fantasy, but Tolkien lays everything and everyone out for you if you just pay attention and go with the flow. If you are confused initially, just keep going. I promise it'll make sense. The stories are gorgeous and well worth it. Please, I beg of you, give it a chance. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the episode. I will say I am on my second very large cup of coffee today, and my adrenals are screaming. They are begging for their lives, and I am not listening. So let's get into the episode. I am going to start with a quote to kind of hint at who we are talking about this episode. Once, he was as great as his fame made him. His knowledge was deep, his thought was subtle, and his hands marvelously skilled, and he had a power over the minds of others. The wise he could persuade, and the smaller folk he could daunt. The power he certainly still keeps. There are not many in Middle-earth that I should say were safe if they were left alone to talk with him, even now when he has suffered a defeat. Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, perhaps, now that his wickedness has been laid bare, but very few others. And this is said by Aragorn, alluding to this person being so powerful and so persuasive with their power that even the likes of Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel could be persuaded by him. So, who do we think we're talking about here? And can you glean who it is based on the clue in the title of the episode? I'll give you a second to think about it while I slam my coffee. Okay, so we're talking about the Lord of Isengard, head of the White Council, the White Wizard himself, Saruman. Played to absolute perfection in the adaptations by Christopher Lee. Rest in peace. Not many people do it better than him. A Tolkien fan, a World War II Special Forces vet, descended from the lineage of Charlemagne, yes, that's right, and happens to be excellent at fencing and has actually met Tolkien in person. Christopher Lee played so many iconic characters such as Dracula, Lucifer, Death, Count Dooku, Fu Manchu, and Lord Summerisle, saying that getting to play Saruman meant the most to him. What an absolute king. We were lucky to have him amongst an impeccable cast for the adaptations. Okay, enough gushing. Let's talk about the literary Saruman now. What's this dude's deal? What did his journey look like? Not great, I'll tell you that right now, but let's fucking go. Saruman was the first of the Order of Istari, who we know as the Five Wizards, right? Who came to Middle-earth as emissaries of the Valar in the Third Age. He also was the leader of the wizards and of the White Council that opposed Sauron. Real good guy shit, right? Well, we'll get into it. Also, it will be a bit confusing as I say Saruman and Sauron. I will try to emphasize their names as best I can since my accent is garbage and I tend to mumble. Okay. So, Saruman's extensive studies of dark magic, however, eventually led him to desire the One Ring and lust for power. Real bad guy shit. Saruman thought he could gain it for himself or become Sauron's servant alone. Saruman allied Isengard with Mordor in the War of the Ring in some weird attempt to butter his boyfriend Sauron up. He is one of the few characters in Middle-earth who is truly morally gray, right? Being neither a genuine servant of evil nor an agent of good. He ultimately trusts only his own counsel and schemes for his own ends. Which is interesting to think about, actually. It reminds you that lusting for power or the power of the One Ring doesn't make you evil. Wearing it doesn't make you evil. That's the ring's whole deal, is trying to trip you up, and is so powerful it can trip up a fucking god wizard whose entire existence was created to be good, a force for good. So the ring doesn't make you evil. Wearing it doesn't make you evil. So this is something that was inside Saruman, right? What's interesting is how Saruman can't get away from his attraction to the ring and its echoes of chaos and wants to claim the ring, whereas many that come in contact with the ring kind of snap out of its effects and want to be away from it once they've kind of come into contact with it. And we see this, in the books and the movies. Saruman was originally one of the powerful Maya of the Aule. His original name was Kurumo. A council was called by Manwë, leader of the Valar, shortly after Sauron's defeat by the last alliance of elves and men, right? Though Sauron at this time was overthrown, he had not been effectively vanquished, and his shadow began to fall upon Middle-earth a second time. It was decided to send 5 emissaries to Middle-earth. These should be mighty peers of Sauron, yet forego might and clothe themselves in flesh, as they were intended to help men and elves unite against Sauron. But the wizards were forbidden from matching the Dark Lord in power and fear. Okay, so what this essentially means, to clothe themselves in flesh, is they can take any shape they want. The wizards can take any shape they want. So they were to clothe themselves in flesh to be peers among, the people of Middle-earth, essentially. So Kurumo was one of those who volunteered, whereas the last one, Olorin, who we know as Gandalf, yes, that is Gandalf's real name, was commanded by Manwë to go as well. It was from this point that Kurumo began to be jealous of Olorin, due to Varda's decision to send Olorin not as the third Istari, but as the second. He was also charged to take Iwendil, who we know as Radagast the Brown, one of my favorite characters. I mean, I love all the wizards, honestly, but I love Radagast, and I'm looking forward to doing an episode on him specifically. Anyways, he was also charged to take Iwendil, Radagast, to please Yavanna, which Kurumo did not wish to do. He kind of wanted to go by himself and do this by himself and have all the glory for himself. And this led to contempt for Radagast as well. So our boy Saruman had an attitude from the fucking jump. The others who were chosen were Alatar and Palando, who we know as the Blue Wizards. Kurumo was then appointed the overall leader of the group of these 5 wizards, right? A lot of people ask about these wizards, the Blue Wizards, and I can't wait to do an episode on them because they are very mysterious and how they are characters that feel so important but never got fleshed out. Anyways, the 5 wizards arrived separately at the Grey Havens in the west of Eriador around the year Third Age 1000. Only the Keeper of the Havens, Círdan the Shipwright, knew Saruman's identity and origin. Saruman would later discover that Círdan had given Narya the Red Ring to Gandalf upon their first landing in Middle-earth. Even though Saruman was immediately considered the head of the Order of the Five Wizards, right? Well, Gandalf was not. Círdan had sussed out Gandalf as the wisest and greatest of these five wizards. So Círdan kind of used his insight and intuition to be like, Gandalf's the guy, Saruman is not. So our boy Círdan had the right of it, trusted his beautiful elf ears and senses, and as you can imagine, Saruman's jealousy of Gandalf grew from these events, perhaps because he feared that he would eventually supplant him as chief of the wizards. Saruman, do I have some unfortunate news for you, my guy? Saruman and the two blue wizards went into the east of Middle-earth. After 1.5 millennia, he returned to the west just as Sauron's power was growing again in Dol Guldur. When the White Council was formed at approximately year 2463 of the Third Age, in order to counter Sauron, Saruman, being the leader of the five wizards, was appointed leader of the council, though Galadriel wanted Gandalf in this position, and she wanted this very badly. Saruman obviously refused to step down due to his pride, while Gandalf had declined. He did not seek to be the lead of the council. He desired this very little, and he did not want to step on Saruman's toes. A humble king, right? At this point, though, Saruman had begun to sense pretty clearly the resurgence of Sauron, and started to quickly envy and desire his power, and especially the One Ring. Saruman was starting to get the feeling that, people did not like him as much as they liked Radagast and Gandalf, right? This was pretty clear to him. And so because of that, I think he leaned into his envy of Sauron for being powerful and having followers. Around this time, this was also like the same year that the One Ring was taken by the hobbit we know as Smeagol, who disappeared with it into the Misty Mountains for hundreds of years. So this is around that time. Smeagol has the ring. Saruman really wants the ring. Everyone can sense the presence of Sauron returning. It was during the meetings of the council that Saruman first noted Gandalf's interest in hobbits and the Shire, and believing that all his deeds related to some as yet undisclosed master plan for his self-enhancement. Saruman himself began keeping a greater watch on Gandalf and sent spies to the Shire. Saruman kind of just assumed everybody was up to something because he himself was up to something. Shakespeare has a quote that I absolutely love that goes, "Suspicion haunts the guilty mind," right? So if someone is accusing you of doing something, it is very likely it is because they are doing something similar themselves. So at first, he himself visited secretly, but stopped when he realized that its inhabitants had noticed him. Saruman was kind of sneaking around the Shire himself, but the hobbits were onto him, right? Amongst the purposes of his visits to the Shire was to procure some hobbit pipeweed, since in secret imitation of Gandalf, he had begun to smoke himself. Saruman wanted to be Gandalf so bad, he started smoking weed. So in the year Third Age 2759, Saruman settled into Isengard with the permission of the Steward of Gondor, Baron. Although he settled only as Warden of the Tower and as a representative of the Steward, the stronghold had by then been abandoned by Gondor, by the way. There he became important in the informal alliance defending the west of Middle-earth, right? In the Tower of Isengard, or Think, he also found one of the remaining Palantiri. I do an episode on the Palantiri, which I think is one of my favorite episodes and quite interesting. So if you want to know more about the Palantiri, definitely go back and listen to that episode. Anyways, so in Third Age 2850, Gandalf entered Dol Guldur and confirmed that the evil presence was indeed Sauron. He's back, he's here, confirmed. On Saruman's advice, the White Council decided against attacking Dol Guldur. Gandalf would then later remark that it was at this council meeting that he first began to suspect that Saruman desired to possess the One Ring. So Gandalf, being highly intuitive and sensitive, was kind of like, my man is incredibly sus, and then kind of kept an eye on him from that point in time. Saruman's real intention was to permit Sauron to build up his strength so that the One Ring would reveal itself. He later found that Sauron had more knowledge of the possible location of the One Ring than he expected. And in Third Age 2941, Saruman finally agreed to attack Dol Guldur. The attack was successful, and by the devices of Saruman, Sauron was driven from the fortress. 10 years after Sauron abandoned Dol Guldur, he returned to Mordor and declared himself openly, full on announcing himself, making a fucking entrance. He established contact with Saruman through the Palantir, captured from Minas Ithil, which had since become known as Minas Morgul. The White Wizard lost the contest of wills with the Dark Lord and was enticed, becoming then a proper servant of Sauron. He no longer opposed him, but desired his victory, though he did retain the desire for the One Ring for himself. So even though he is kind of now a proper servant of the Dark Lord, he still wants the ring for himself. This is something that never leaves him through his evolution of the story. He still seeks and wants the ring for himself. Taking Isengard for his own in Third Age 2953, Saruman began to trouble the borders of Rohan with Orc and Dunlending raids, whilst keeping hidden any evidence of his treachery. So he was kind of like the man behind the curtain, if you will, kind of orchestrating these attacks. In preparation for the war, Saruman amassed a mighty army of Arks, Uruk-hai, half-orcs, wicked men, and wolves within Isengard, and kept up the facade of his allegiance to Sauron while searching for the ring for himself. As we know, he never stops. Little did he know that his master was already aware of his plans despite having failed to dominate him fully. When Gandalf presented Saruman with the discovery and location of the One Ring, Saruman revealed his desire for it and that he was in thrall to Sauron, right? He had also shed the title of Saruman the White. Saruman no longer had any loyalty to the White Council or the Ring Bearer. So Saruman just fucking laid it all out in front of Gandalf and was like, here's the fucking deal. Don't give a fuck about you guys. Working with the Dark Lord. I'm looking for the ring for myself. Fuck y'all, right? He then tried unsuccessfully to gain Gandalf's aid, which is fucking insane to me. When Gandalf refused to join with either him or Sauron, Saruman held him captive in Isengard. Gandalf later escaped with the help of Gwaihir the Windlord, one of Middle-earth's great eagles, and made Saruman's treachery known to the rest of the White Council. You just fucked up in the biggest way, you goofy bitch. We are going to get into some more of this bozo's goofy shit, but I'm going to kind of condense it best I can since we cover a lot of this in past episodes. And I want to get into some good shit. After fucking up big time with Gandalf, the Nazgul come 2 days after Gandalf's escape from Isengard, and Saruman used his voice to persuade the Lord of the Nazgul that he did not know the ring's location, but that Gandalf did, and they should seek him nearby. Classic Saruman, right? Okay, so after the Nazgul heard this, they went back on the main road and instead found Grima Wormtongue, who was on his way to tell Saruman that Gandalf had been to Edoras. Revealed to the Nazgul that Saruman was hiding his knowledge of the Shire from them, proving that the wizard's allegiance to Sauron was a sham. These hoes ain't loyal is essentially the takeaway here. Long story short, Saruman sussed out that his bullshit was on the outs and he was about to be met with repercussions to his actions. So now my boy is in total panic mode. Believing that he would find no pity from either quarter, no shit, dude, he is scrambling to kind of come up with a plan. Although, sidebar, Gandalf, being a generous king, actually did offer him pardon later on. So Saruman had the opportunity to take pardon and pity from Gandalf, but chose not to. But I digress. Safe to say, though, he had lost any chance of rising in Sauron's favor. Saruman now put all efforts into obtaining the One Ring for himself. He essentially quit his part-time job as a goofball to pursue it full-time, essentially. Not all of his efforts ever became known, but they included sending spies to waylay Frodo Baggins on his flight from the Shire, attacking Rohan outright with orcs, and dispatching raiding parties of Uruk-hai, accompanied by orcs from the Misty Mountains on likely routes the Fellowship of the Ring might take through Rohan to go towards Gondor. Behemoth, you're late, dude. We're almost done with the episode. You're late. Okay, so one of these companies of orcs that Saruman had dispatched had captured Pippin and Merry and shot Boromir with many black-feathered arrows when he tried to defend the hobbits. This led Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli on a search which eventually led to the Battle of the Hornburg, as well as the destruction of Isengard by the Ents under Treebeard, leading to Sauron losing one of his most potent servants and the end of Saruman's reign of terror in the West. It's like, bro, were you even trying? You came to Middle-earth a god wizard and said, nah, I'd rather suck tired ass Dark Lord dick for free. Insane. Well, now we know from the last few episodes that I did this season that Saruman eventually fled to the Shire, ransacking the joint and ringing in a fucked up industrial age, making Shire life a hellhole. These events actually being the final chapter in the books. Long story short, Saruman gets smoked by his boy Grima after Grima slit his throat. Whenever I tell people who have only watched the movies that this happens, they don't believe me, and honestly, nobody should believe me ever, but this is real life. This actually happens. This is how the book ends. Saruman, being a Maya, did not truly die, though. His spirit separated from his body, much like his master Sauron's after the downfall of Numenor. Now, as an incorporeal spirit, he should have been called to the halls of Mandos, but the tale implies that he was barred from returning. They straight up had a black and white surveillance camera footage photo of him hanging up in the Hall of Mandos like, if you see this man, do not let him in. Tolkien indicated that his spirit was left naked, powerless, and wandering, never to return to Middle-earth. Oof. That sucks. That fucking sucks. It sucks that Saruman squandered all of his power and the chance he had to do so much good in Middle-earth. We hate to see a fallen wizard. But that pretty much wraps up the episode. That wraps up, our boy Saruman's journey during the War of the Ring. He's definitely a very interesting character. As I said earlier, I love all the wizards so much. Saruman included, even though he's a fucking goofball. But that's it. And yes, this concludes season 2, which feels insane to me. We will be taking a break for a couple weeks so I can script out some more episodes, get some sleepings in, and just kind of ramp up for an even better season 3. I have some ideas on how to improve for season 3. And yeah, I thank you all for listening. This has definitely been a really interesting project and exercise. I've said it before, but it is extremely difficult to do a solo podcast. I am going to try and get some guests on for season 3. But yeah, I have a lot planned for season 3, and I just thank you guys for hanging in there and listening. And of course, as you know, or maybe you don't know, you can go to www.youhavemysword.podcast for all the links to things, to where you can support, socials, where you can find me personally. A special shout out to my producer Rachel for dealing with me. I am chronically late to send her episodes. So everyone say thank you, Rachel. Say thank you, Rachel, for good luck and good spirits going into the weekend. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. I really need to just end this episode so I can send it to Rachel so she doesn't hire somebody to kill me. So with that, thank you guys so much. And as always, you have my sword.
Edgeworks Nebula.